She slid the ledger across the kitchen table and tapped the bottom line twice with one fingernail. 8 years. Rent-free. We're calling it 31,000. It comes out of your half. 8 years I had lived in that house. 8 years of turning my grandmother every 2 hours so her skin would not break open. 8 years of crushing pills into applesauce. At 10 p.m., I was never paid $1 for any of it. And 9 days after we buried her, my own family handed me a bill for the room I slept in. Here is what nobody at that table knew. Every one of those hours had already been paid for. In full. In full. Somebody else had been cashing them for 6 years. Today, deciding whether a care hour actually happened is my job. I read home care timesheets for the state. Somebody submits a sheet that says they sat with an old woman for 6 hours on a Tuesday, and I am the one who decides whether that Tuesday was real. Last spring, I finally read the 8 years of sheets that had been filed in my name, in my own handwriting. Then, I did the one thing my family never believed I had in me. I filed the paperwork. There was a wind-up kitchen timer on the counter behind her while she talked. White plastic, a dial you turn with your thumb. Remember it. It comes back at the end, and it does not mean the same thing. My name is Vera. I am 46 years old. And if you have ever been the person everybody counted on and nobody counted, stay with me, because the house where they erased me had been keeping a receipt for every hour I gave it. And I am the one who finally went and got it. Let me take you back. 8 years before that morning, I moved into my grandmother's back bedroom with 2 suitcases and a milk crate of books. She had a stroke on a Sunday. In April, the left side of her body stopped taking instructions. She was 81. She had raised my sister and me from the time I was 6, in that same house after our mother died. So there was never really a conversation about who would come. There was a family meeting on the front porch. It lasted 11 minutes. I know, because I have always been the kind of person who looks at the clock. My sister ran the meeting. Corinne is 5 years older than me. She had a husband, a daughter in 5th grade, a 2-story house on the good side of town, and a job selling insurance to retired people. Medicare plans, life policies, the coverage that pays for a nursing home. She stood on the porch with her keys already in her hand and laid it out like a schedule. 6 months, she said, just until we figure out placement. You are the one with no kids, Vera. You know how that sentence works. It sounds like logistics. It is not logistics. It is a verdict about whose life is made of load-bearing material and whose is made of spare time. I said, yes, in under a minute. I want to be honest about that. Nobody dragged me into that house. I went because she was the woman who taught me to drive in a church parking lot and sat through every one of my parent-teacher conferences with her purse in her lap. I would go again. That is the part that makes people uncomfortable when I tell this story. So, I will say it plainly and then move on. I do not regret the 8 years. I regret that I never once asked where the paperwork went. 6 months turned into 8 years. It happens the way water gets into a basement. Not all at once. The first year, I still had my job. I was a scheduler at a medical office, 40 hours a week, and I did the care around it. Up at 5:30 to get her cleaned and fed. Home at lunch to check on her. Back at 6 p.m. for the evening round. Awake at 2 a.m. to turn her. My sister came on Sundays with a casserole dish and a laminated care schedule she had made on her computer. She never worked a single shift on it. That laminated schedule stayed on the refrigerator for 8 years, and I never once saw her follow it. The kitchen timer came from Nana's own drawer. It was older than I was. I set it for 2 hours. Every 2 hours, day and night. because that is how often a body that cannot move itself has to be moved. When it went off, I got up. That timer decided when I slept, when I ate, when I could take a shower. For 8 years, every 2 hours of my life belonged to somebody else, and a piece of white plastic was in charge of announcing it. I want you to hold on to that, because there is a moment coming, about halfway through this, where I find out exactly what those 2-hour blocks were worth on paper, down to the dollar. It is not a small number. Stay with me. This is the part where it stops being a story about love and starts being a story about accounting. 7 years before that morning, about a year into it, I lost the job, not dramatically. My grandmother had a bad stretch in February, a urinary infection that turned her confused and combative, and I burned through what was left of my leave, then my unpaid days, then my supervisor's patience. She was kind about it. She said the words people say. She said, the schedule needed someone who could be there at 8 a.m. every morning, without a phone call at 7:50. I remember sitting in the parking lot of that office, with my badge in my lap. I was 34, and the first thing I felt was not panic. It was relief. Ishun, that is how far down I already was. Losing my only income felt like a weight coming off, because it meant I would stop failing at one of the 2 jobs. I called my sister from that parking lot. She said, well, honestly, this is easier. Then she said the sentence I would hear for the next 7 years. For the first time, and listen, we don't send a bill to family, Vera. That is not what this is. 2 weeks later, she came over with the blue forms. They were carbon copy sheets, the kind with a yellow page underneath that keeps a copy when you press hard, pale blue at the top. There was a grid for the date, a grid for the hours, a line for what you did, bathing, medication, transfer, and 2 boxes at the bottom. 1 box said caregiver. 1 said supervising family member. She had a whole box of them. In her trunk, you need to log your hours. She said, it is for the county. There is a respite program, and if we ever want help down the road, they need documentation. Just fill it in every day and initial the corner. I'll take them at the end of the month. I asked her what a respite program was. Relief care. She said, somebody comes and sits with her a few hours, so you can get out. There is a waiting list. This puts us on it. She was standing in the kitchen with her sunglasses pushed up in her hair, and then she said the thing I did not think about again for 6 years. I sell these policies. Vera, I know what covers what. Let me handle the paperwork side. That is literally my job. Every night for 6 years, I sat at that kitchen table after the 10 p.m. medication and filled out a blue sheet, the date, the hours, bathing, feeding, medication, transfer, times 12. My initials in the corner, small, in the same blue pen I kept in the drawer with the twine and the batteries. At the end of every month, my sister took them. Nobody from any respite program ever called. Not once in 6 years. When I asked, she said the list was long. The county was a mess. They were understaffed. That answer worked on me for 6 years, and I want to be fair to the woman I was. I was averaging 4 hours of broken sleep a night, and I was grateful anyone was handling anything at all. If you have ever handed something to a family member and never asked again because you were simply too tired to ask, then you already know the exact shape of what I am about to tell you. And you know, it was not stupidity. It was exhaustion, and somebody was counting on it. That is the first thing I need you to keep in your pocket. The blue sheets. My handwriting. Oh, her name. At the bottom, 4 years before that morning, my grandmother got pneumonia and spent 19 days in the hospital. That is the second thing I need you to keep in your pocket. 19 days. It matters later, in a way I could not have imagined at the time. I slept 19 nights in a brown vinyl chair in room 411. It was the hospital's version of the chair I already slept in at home. The brown recliner in the corner of Nana's bedroom, the one with the split in the armrest that I had covered with packing tape. 8 years. That chair faced a bed. The hospital one did too. The nurses brought me a blanket, the second night without my asking. By the fourth night, one of them started bringing two. My sister came twice. Both visits were under an hour. On the second one, she took a photograph of Nana's hand in hers, and she posted it that evening, with a long caption about our family's matriarch and the strength of women who show up. 41 people commented. Several of them told her she was an angel. I read the whole thing at 3 a.m. on a phone at 11%, in a chair, 4 feet from the actual woman. I did not comment. That is the closest I have ever come to saying something out loud. And I did not do it. That is also the month Yolanda came into my life. And I need to tell you about her, because she is the reason this story has an ending instead of just a middle. Yolanda was the home health nurse the hospital set up when they discharged Nana. She came Thursdays. She was 61, built like a woman who had lifted people for a living for 40 years. And she did not do the thing everybody else did. Everybody else came into that house and told me how amazing I was. Yolanda came into that house and looked at me. The first Thursday, she watched me do a transfer, getting Nana from the bed into the wheelchair. And she said, "Who taught you that?" I said, "Nobody." I said, I had watched a video and then done it wrong for a while. She said, "You are doing it the way we teach it. Somebody should be paying you." I laughed at her. I actually laughed. I said the words my sister had trained into me like a hand on a dog's collar. I said, "You don't send a bill to family." Yolanda did not laugh back. She kept folding the pad in her hands, and she said, 3 weeks after Nana came home from the hospital, I asked my sister for money. One time. I want to be precise about this, because I have gone over it in my head more times than is good for a person. I did not ask for wages. I asked for $300, because the transmission on my car had started slipping, and I had not put gas in it with my own money since the summer. I asked in the kitchen, standing up at 4 in the afternoon, and I could not look at her while I did it. She got very quiet and very warm. That is her range. Quiet and warm is how you know it is coming, she said. Vera, honey, do you know how it makes me feel when you put a price on her? Then she said it again. We don't send a bill to family. I said, okay. I sold my mother's wedding ring at a place on the state road for $210, and I put a used transmission in the car with it, and I never asked my sister for anything again. For 4 more years. Now, Wei, stay with me here, because I need you to hold 2 things at the same time. That same month, the 19 days in the hospital, the chair, the blanket, the photograph with 41 comments. A blue sheet went in with my handwriting on it, saying I had provided in-home care in that house every day for the full month, and it was paid. Keep going. Towing, because 3 years after that hospital month, something changed in that house. And at the time, I thought it was bad luck. 1 year before that morning, the money ran out. That is how my sister put it, sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday, with a folder in front of her. She said the savings were gone. The property taxes had gone up, and we were going to have to make hard choices. She used the phrase, hard choices, 4 times. In one conversation, I counted, because counting is what I do when I cannot argue. The hard choices were all mine. She stopped collecting the blue sheets that month. 2. 8 years of habit. And it just quietly ended. And I did not notice for a long time. At the time, I thought she had finally given up on the respite list. The grocery money stopped that month. For 7 years, she had transferred me $300 on the first, out of Nana's account, for food and household supplies, for 2 people. It stopped. It stopped. She said the account was down to almost nothing, and she needed to protect what was left for emergencies. Then, the prescriptions became my problem. Not all of them. The ones the insurance covered kept coming, but the ones it did not, the barrier cream, the thickener for liquids, the incontinence supplies, the protein drinks, those became something I bought. I want to give you the real number, because the real number is what makes people angry on my behalf, and I have never been able to be angry on my own behalf. It ran about $240 a month, for 12 months, just under $3,000, out of a woman with no job and no income, buying supplies for a house she did not own. I sold things. I sold my good winter coat. I sold a guitar I had owned since I was 19. I did a shift here and there, sitting with an elderly man 2 streets over. Cash, 4 hours on a Saturday, while my aunt covered Nana. And I did not tell my sister about that money, and that is the only thing I ever kept from her. And in the middle of that same year, my sister and her husband bought a lake place at Schaefer. I found out from a photograph. A pontoon boat, a dock, my niece in a life vest. A caption about how hard work pays off. I looked at that photograph in a kitchen where I had just poured a bottle of thickener into a glass of apple juice, because my grandmother could no longer swallow water safely. Here is what I thought at the time. I want you to hear how ordinary my thinking was, because if you have ever wondered why the person in the story does not figure it out sooner, this is why. I thought, her husband got a promotion. I thought, she has always been better with money than me. I thought, it is not fair. But not fair is not the same as wrong. I did not think, she is spending it. I never once put those 2 facts in the same room together. The money that ran out and the money that appeared. Because putting them together required believing something about my sister that I did not have the strength to believe, while I was also getting up at 2 a.m. That is not stupidity. That is what happens to a mind that is running on 4 hours of sleep and 1 relationship. My grandmother died on a Thursday morning in March at 6:20 in the morning, holding my hand in the bed I had turned her in every 2 hours for 8 years. I was the only person in the house. I called my sister at 6:26. She got there at 8:15, and the first thing she said when she came through the door was, "Did you already call the funeral home? Or were you waiting for me?" The funeral was that Saturday. My sister spoke. She talked for 6 minutes about a woman who taught her everything she knew about strength. She mentioned me once, at the end, as my sister Vera, who helped out so much at the end. 8 years. Helped out. At the end, I did not cry. At the funeral, I want to be clear about that, because a lot of people find it strange. I sat in the second row and looked at the flowers and thought about whether I had left the porch light on. 9 days later, on a Tuesday morning at 7:20, my sister and her husband came to the house for what she had called a family meeting about the estate. I had made coffee. That is what I did. Still, out of 8 years of habit. I made coffee for the people coming to tell me what my life was going to be. They sat on one side of the kitchen table. Her husband did not speak the entire time. He looked at his phone twice. She had a manila folder and a legal pad. She said the house had to be sold. She said Nana's will left the house to the 2 of us equally, which was true, and I had never expected anything different. Then she turned the legal pad around so I could read it and slid it across the table. It was a ledger 2 columns, handwritten, in the same tidy print she has had since high school. On one side, the expenses of the estate, funeral, taxes, the roof from 4 years back, legal fees. On the other side, under my name, a line that said, housing, 8 years, $325. A month, 96 months, 30, $1,200. She tapped the bottom line twice, with one fingernail. 8 years. Rent-free, she said. We're calling it 31,000. It comes out of your half. I think that is more than fair. Honestly, I could have used market rate. I sat there for a second, and I heard the refrigerator running. That is the detail. My body kept, not her face. The refrigerator. I said, you are charging me rent. She got quiet and warm. She said, Vera, nobody's charging anybody anything. This is just what it costs to be honest about what everyone contributed. And then, because that woman has never in her life been able to leave a knife in without turning it, she said, you didn't send us a bill for the caregiving, did you? Number. Undefference. Because we don't send a bill to family. This is the same thing. How'd, Dad, it just goes on the sheet. The same thing. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice at my sister, and I did not start that morning. I went into the back bedroom, and I put my clothes into a laundry basket, because the suitcases were in the attic, and I was not going to ask her husband to get the ladder. I took the milk crate of books. I took the brown recliner out of Nana's room by myself, one end at a time, down the porch steps, into the bed of the truck, and neither of them got up, and neither of them offered, and both of them watched me through the window. The last thing I took was the timer off the kitchen counter. I put it in my coat pocket. She saw me do it, and she said, really? I said, it is mine. I am the one who used it. I drove away from that house at 7:50 in the morning, with $211 in my checking account. No job, no address, and a chair in the back of a truck. If you have ever loaded your entire life into a vehicle in under 30 minutes, while somebody watched you do it through a window, comment, counted below. Just that. One word. I read them, and I want to know how many of us there are, because for a long time, I thought it was only me. Now here is the part that changes everything, and I need you to remember where we are. This is still the day I left, and I do not yet know a single thing about what was in that insurance file. I did not have anywhere to go, so I drove to the pharmacy parking lot on the state road, because it was the only place I had been going regularly for 8 years, and my hands took me there. I sat in the truck, and around 9 in the morning, my phone lit up on the passenger seat. It was Yolanda. She had stopped coming when Nana went on hospice, and hospice had ended the way hospice ends, and I had not talked to her in 5 weeks. Her message said, 4 words. You, out of there. I typed yes. She typed back an address and a time, noon, at a gas station off the highway, the one with the picnic table nobody uses. She was already there when I pulled in, sitting on the picnic table with 2 coffees, still in scrubs, 61 years old, and completely unbothered by the fact that I looked the way I looked. I told her everything. It took about 20 minutes. The ledger, the 31,000, the 8 years, the laminated schedule that never once got followed. I told it in a flat voice, like I was reading somebody else's chart, because that is the only way I know how. And here is what she did not do. She did not tell me to sue anybody. She did not tell me my sister was a monster. She did not tell me I was amazing, or strong, or an angel. Not one person had listened to me for 8 years without immediately trying to hand me a solution or a compliment. And this woman just sat on a picnic table in the cold and let me finish. Then she said, "The thing I have thought about nearly every day. Since," she said, "everybody in that house knew exactly what you did. Knowing is free, baby. Counting costs somebody something. That is why nobody was counting." I did not understand it that day. I thought she was talking about gratitude. She was not talking about gratitude. She was talking about arithmetic. And she was more right than she knew, because somebody had been counting. Somebody had been counting every hour, in ink, and mailing it in. She finished her coffee, told me a nursing home 20 minutes. North was so short-staffed. They were hiring off the street, and left. That was it. That was the entire intervention. I sat in the truck in that parking lot afterward, and I cried for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I looked at the clock when it started, the way you do when you have spent 8 years measuring everything in 2-hour blocks. 11 minutes, alone, in a truck with a recliner in the back, and then it was over. And I have not cried about my family since, not once. Hughes by a Taden. Not in the office. Not in the meeting. Not at the end of this story. Everything I am about to tell you, I did dry-eyed. That is not strength. That is just what is left. Now here is where I go fast, because you already know I survived. And the survival is not the interesting part. I took the nursing home job, overnight shift, certified nursing assistant training, paid for by the facility. 3 floors, 32 residents, everything they taught me in that classroom. I had already been doing alone in a back bedroom for 8 years. I passed the state exam with the highest score in my cohort, and the instructor asked me where I had trained. I lived in a rented room over a garage for 14 months. The recliner did not fit up the stairs, so it sat in a storage unit for a year and a half. And I paid $29 a month to keep a chair I could not use. And I am not going to explain that, because if you understand it, you already understand it. 2 years after that morning, the facility moved me to the billing office, because I was the only aide on staff who could read a care plan and a spreadsheet in the same hour. That is where I learned what a timesheet actually is. Not a form, a claim, a statement submitted to somebody who pays that says a specific human being provided a specific service to a specific person on a specific day. 3 years after that morning, I applied for a job with the state. Program Integrity Analyst, which is a long way of saying I am the person who decides which caregiving hours actually get paid for. Home care agencies bill the state for the hours their workers spend with elderly and disabled people. Somebody has to check whether those hours happened. That somebody is me and 11 other people on my floor. I was hired on a Monday. I found out later that what got me the job was not the certification. In the interview, they asked what made me think I could spot a bad timesheet. And I said, because I filled one out every night for 6 years, and I never once checked what happened to it. They thought that was humility. It was not. It was the first time that sentence had ever come out of my mouth, and I heard it in the room the same second they did, and something in the back of my skull went very quiet and started paying attention. But I did not act on it, not for 2 more years. I want to be honest about that, because people always ask why I waited. I waited because I had a life, a 1-bedroom apartment, with the recliner finally out of storage, and in the corner, by the window, a parking spot, a job with a badge, and a dental plan. Every hour I worked, somebody paid me for. I was not going to reach back into that house for anything. The family reached out exactly twice in those 5 years. My sister sent a message about 11 months. In that said, she hoped I had gotten the help I needed. There was a group email about a cousin's baby. That is all. I never got my half of the house sale either. The estate sat in process for 5 years, which I now understand was not the county being slow, but I did not push. I told myself I did not want the money. Then, 5 years after that morning, my supervisor put me up for the senior investigator track, and that is where this turns. So, stay with me. If this story is landing where it lands for you, take 1 second and subscribe, because the next 20 minutes are the part I could not say out loud to anybody for 5 years. And it starts with a form I had to fill out for a promotion. The senior track has a requirement. To sit for it, you have to document 3,000 hours of hands-on care experience, verified by a third party, not claimed. Verified. I had about 22,000 hours of hands-on care experience, and no way to prove a single one of them, because the person I worked for was dead, and the employer never existed. So I did what I do. I started pulling records. I got the home health agency to certify the 2 years. Yolanda came on Thursdays. That was 400 hours. If I stretched it, I got the pharmacy to print 8 years of delivery logs to that address, with my name as the person who signed for them. Helpful, not sufficient. And then I called the attorney's office that had been sitting on my grandmother's estate for 5 years, and I asked for a full accounting. I was allowed to ask. That is the whole trick of this story, and I want to say it clearly, so nobody thinks I did anything clever. I was a named beneficiary of an open estate. A beneficiary can request an accounting of that estate. It is a form. It is 2 pages. I had been allowed to ask for 5 years, and I had simply never asked, because I did not want anything from those people. It came in a brown envelope. 11 days later, I read it standing at my kitchen counter with my coat still on. Assets. Debts. The house. Sale. The line where $31,200 had been charged against my half for housing. Exactly the way she said it would be. And under assets, near the bottom, one line I had never seen in my life. Cardinal State Life. Long-term care. Policy. Issued 22 years earlier. Status, benefit pool, exhausted. A long-term care policy is the insurance you buy, so that when you cannot take care of yourself anymore, somebody gets paid to do it for you. My grandmother had bought one in her 50s. She had paid the premiums for 22 years. Exhausted means it paid out. All of it. I stood in that kitchen for a long time. I am not going to pretend I understood it in 1 second. What I actually thought, first, was that it must have been for the hospital. Then I remembered that the hospital was Medicare. Then I thought maybe there had been an agency at some point, before I moved in. Then, I did the thing I do for a living. I stopped guessing, and I went and got the record. I wrote to the insurance company's records office. Not a lawyer, not a threat. A records request. I explained that I had been the person providing in-home care at that address for 8 years, that I needed verification of the dates and hours of home care service for a professional credential, and I asked what their file showed. That is not a clever move. That is the most boring move available. It is also the only one that works, because a company will lie to your face and tell the truth to its own file. The answer came back on 1 page. I have that page in a folder in my apartment, and I could recite it with my eyes closed. It confirmed that the policy included a family caregiver benefit, which is a feature that pays a relative to provide care at home instead of paying an outside agency. It confirmed the claim was opened 7 years before that morning. It confirmed that benefits had been paid for 72 consecutive months. $3,600 a month. 72 months. $259,200. And then the last line. Caregiver of record. It was not my name. I want you to sit in that number with me for a second, because a number that size stops meaning anything if I just say it fast. $259,000 is more than that house sold for. It is more than my grandmother's entire estate was worth. It is 11 years of what I make now, with the badge and the dental plan. It was paid for my hands. For 8 years, that money was mailed out every month against a written statement that somebody was in that bedroom at 2 in the morning, turning an 81-year-old woman onto her left side. Somebody was somebody, and that somebody sold her mother's wedding ring for $210 to fix a transmission. And 9 days after the woman died, they charged me $31,000 for the room. I did not call my sister. I want to be very clear about that, because everything after this depends on it. I did not call her. I did not email her. I did not drive up there. If I had, this would be a story about a fight in a kitchen, and she would still have the boat. I did 3 things instead, in this order, over 4 days. First, I wrote a memo to my own supervisor, in writing. Same day, I disclosed that I had a personal conflict involving a private insurance claim connected to my family, that I intended to file a consumer complaint as a private citizen, and I asked to be formally walled off from anything that touched it. He wrote back in 9 minutes and put it in my file. I did not use one thing for my job. Not a database, not a phone number, not a colleague, not one. I have spent 5 years learning exactly how people get caught, and the number one way people get caught is that they cheat while they are right. Second, I filed a complaint with the state insurance department's fraud division. Anyone can do this. It is a web form. It took me 40 minutes because I attached the estate accounting, the 1-page letter, and a 2-paragraph statement of who was actually in that house. Third, I sent the same package to the insurance company's Special Investigations Unit, which is the department inside an insurance company whose entire job is finding out when somebody lied to it. Companies do not investigate this for your sake. They investigate it because that is their money. Then I went to work for 6 weeks and said nothing to anyone. The investigator called me on a Wednesday. He asked if I would come in and look at some documents to confirm whether the handwriting was mine. They put me in a small room with a table. He had a folder about 2 inches thick, and he did it 1 page at a time, which I have since learned is deliberate, and which I now do myself when I sit across from somebody. First page, a blue carbon sheet, the date at the top from 6.5 years before. Bathing, feeding, medication, transfer, times 12. My initials in the corner, small, in blue pen. He asked if I recognized it. I said, "That is my handwriting. That is my grandmother's kitchen table." Then he turned it around and showed me the bottom of the same sheet. 2 boxes, caregiver, signature, supervising, family member. Both of them were signed by my sister. Second page, the payment register, a printed list, 1 line per month, 72 lines, each one showing the same amount going to the same account. The account was in the name of her insurance agency. 72 lines. I read all of them. He let me. Then he said, "There is one more I'd like you to look at." He put down a blue sheet from 4 years before that morning. March, the month. My grandmother spent 19 days in the hospital with pneumonia. Every day on that sheet was filled in, full in-home care, bathing, feeding, medication, transfer, in that house, on days when that house was empty, and I was asleep in a brown vinyl chair, in room 411, with 2 hospital blankets on me. My handwriting covered the days she was home. The other 19 days were filled in by somebody else, imitating it and doing a poor job. That is the page that turned this from a family betrayal into a criminal file. And that is the page I could not stop looking at, because whoever filled in those 19 days had to sit down and think about what a woman does at 2 in the morning and write it out. 19 times while that woman was in a hospital chair. The investigator asked me if I was all right. I said I was fine. I asked him what happens next. He said, that depends on how much of it she has spent. She had spent most of it. I did not learn that from her. I learned it in pieces over 4 months, from letters that came to my apartment on paper, because that is how institutions talk when they have decided something. But she called first. The insurance department sends a notice when a complaint is opened against a licensed agent. She got hers on a Friday. She called me 19 times that weekend. I know it was 19 because I counted, and because 19 is a number that has followed me around this story. I did not answer any of them. Not out of strategy. I just did not have anything to say to her. On a telephone. On Sunday, my aunt in Fort Wayne called instead, and my aunt is 74 and had nothing to do with any of it. And she asked me to please just sit down with my sister like adults. So I said yes, and I picked the place, and I picked the time. A restaurant off the interstate, halfway between us, 2 in the afternoon, on a Tuesday, in the section by the window. I got there 20 minutes early, and sat facing the door. You learn that from 8 years of watching a doorway. She came in with my aunt, and she had done her hair, and she was already crying before she sat down. She said my name, like it was the end of a long argument we had been having for years, which, in her defense, it was. She started with the thing she always starts with. She said, I don't know what you think you found, but you don't understand how any of this works. I let her go for about 4 minutes. She covered a lot of ground. She said, Nana would be devastated. She said, the money went into the house, mostly. She said she had put years of her own life into managing everything, while I got to be the one who just got to be there. And that was the sentence. Got to be there. That told me I was never going to get anything out of this woman that I wanted, so I stopped waiting for it. I said her name once, Corinne, and she stopped talking, because I had not said it in 5 years. Then I put my hands flat on the table, and I told her I had 4 things to say, and that after I said them, I was going to leave, and that none of them were a question. 1. The insurance company paid a home care benefit on Nana's policy for 72 months, $3,600 a month, and I have the letter that says so. 2. I asked Sewan. The sheets they paid on are in my handwriting. I filled them out at that kitchen table after the 10 p.m. medication for 6 years, and your name is signed at the bottom of every one of them. 3. One of those months is the month Nana spent 19 days in the hospital. Somebody filled in those 19 days as in home care. It was not me. My handwriting stops on the 11th. 4. I did not send any of this to you. I sent it to the state and to the company 6 weeks ago as a private citizen, and I disclosed it in writing to my employer the same day so that nobody could ever say I used my job. It is already assigned to an investigator. There is nothing you can say to me that changes a document. My aunt had her hand over her mouth. My sister said, Vera, you are going to destroy this family over money. And I said, the only thing I had rehearsed. I said, you told me for 8 years that we don't send a bill to family. You were right. I never sent one. You did. Every month. For 6 years, with my hours on it. I am not billing you. I am just no longer the only person who has read it. Then I put $12 on the table for my coffee and my aunt's pie. And I walked out to the parking lot. And I drove home. And I did not cry. And I did not call anybody. And I made dinner. If you have ever had to say the truest sentence of your life to somebody who was never, ever going to hear it, you know that it does not feel like winning. It feels like closing a door in a house you already moved out of. Here is what happened after that. This is the part people want, and I am going to give it to you flat. Because flat is how it actually arrived. She escalated for about 5 weeks. Voicemails, mostly 12 in one night at one point, going from crying to something else, and back again. Her husband sent me one email that called me a jealous, childless woman who had finally found a way to matter. My aunt sent a group email to 11 relatives with the subject line, "Please read," asking everyone to pray for reconciliation. 2 cousins I had not spoken to in 6 years texted me to say that whatever happened, family is family. I answered exactly one message, her husband's, IND, Auschend. I wrote back one line. The investigator's name and number are in the notice you already have. Then, she showed up at my building. She signed in at the front desk of a state office building at 10:40 in the morning and asked for me by name. And the desk called upstairs. And I sat at my desk on the 11th floor and told them I was not available. And I asked them to note the time in the visitor log. And then I went back to the file I was working on and finished it. Do you know what it takes to audit a stranger's timesheet while your sister is downstairs in a lobby? It takes 8 years of practice, getting up when a timer goes off. She left after 40 minutes. That was the last time she was ever in the same building as me. Now, the consequences. 3 of them. And I am going to say them the way the letters said them, without decoration. The first one came from the state insurance department, about 4 months after I filed. Their investigation found that the claims had been submitted with false statements about who was providing the care. Her license was revoked. That is the license that let her sell insurance to other people's grandmothers in the same county. For 19 years, she had 11 days to notify her clients. Her agency's name came off the office door on the square by the end of the summer. The second came from the company. They wanted their money back. All of it? The full $259,200, plus interest, from the person who received it. She did not have it. Most of it had turned into a lake place at Schaefer, a pontoon boat, 4 years of private school tuition, and 2 vehicles. There is a legal process for a company to attach what is left, and that process moved the way a glacier moves. And it took the lake place. The boat went in October, on a consignment lot on the highway. And I know that because somebody in the family made sure I knew. The third one came from the estate attorney, and it is the one that actually changed my life. Once the insurance file existed, the charge against my half of the house did not survive 10 minutes of a real lawyer looking at it. Her own attorney withdrew it in writing. In writing. One paragraph, on letterhead, the housing charge of $31,200 against the beneficiary is withdrawn, and the estate will distribute equally. The estate closed 9 weeks later. My half came to $58,000, and there was a fourth thing. Nobody sent me a letter about this one, so I will say it myself. The county prosecutor accepted the referral. She pled to 1 count, and the sentence was probation and restitution. And every dollar of that restitution goes to the insurance company, not to me. Not $1 of any of it ever came to me for the work. I knew that before I filed. I want you to hear that, because people always assume the payoff was the money. I filed, knowing the money went to a company in another state. I filed because a record existed that said those 8 years happened, and somebody else's name was on it. And I was not going to spend the rest of my life being the only person on Earth who knew where I had been. Although the record did one more thing. And this is the part I still cannot say out loud without stopping for a second. Remember why I pulled the estate accounting in the first place. 3,000 hours of hands-on care experience, verified by a third party. 72 months of blue sheets, describing every bath, every meal, every medication, every transfer, in a specific house, at a specific address, certified as authentic business records by an insurance company that had already investigated them and confirmed exactly who had done the work. The most complete documentation of my life's work was assembled by the person who stole it. I sat for the senior track 11 months ago. I passed. I lead a review team now, 4 analysts, and every one of them has heard me say the same thing in training, which is that the person whose handwriting is on the form is not always the person who got paid. So, find the hands. I did not get my family back. I want to be honest with you about that, because I have watched 100 of these stories end with somebody apologizing in a hospital hallway. And that is not what happened here. My sister has never apologized. Not once. Not in any form. Last December, I got an email from her at 11 at night, with no subject line. 3 paragraphs long, about how much Nana would have hated what I did to this family, and how she hopes I am proud of my little investigation. There was no apology in it, and there was no acknowledgement in it, and there was not one sentence about the 8 years. I read it twice. Then I filed it in the folder with everything else, because that is what I do with documents now. I did not answer it. I have not spoken to her in 14 months. My aunt still sends the group emails. I still do not respond to the ones about reconciliation. 2 cousins stopped talking to me entirely, and one of them told somebody that I ruined my sister's life over a chair, which I think is the funniest sentence anyone has ever said about me. Here is what I got. Instead, my niece found me. Junie was 11 years old the year of the pneumonia, and she used to sit on the floor of that bedroom doing her homework while I worked, because it was quiet in there and nobody bothered her. She is 20 now. She reached out on her own, the summer after all of it, and she asked if she could visit. And she came, and she was terrified. I would ask her to pick a side. I did not ask her to pick a side. She is a kid whose mother is going through what her mother is going through. She is in nursing school, 2nd year. She sat on my porch in August and told me that in her skills lab, the first time they had to do a 2-person transfer, she did it alone and correctly, and the instructor asked where she learned it, and she said she told the instructor, "My aunt taught me. She used to let me hold the draw sheet." She said, "I never told anybody it was you. I am telling you now." That is the warmest thing anyone has ever said to me, and I did not cry then either, which I think Yolanda would consider a personal failure on my part. Yolanda retired last spring. By the way, I drove up for the party. She introduced me to a table of nurses as the one who was doing it right in a back bedroom with nobody watching. And then, she made me eat a piece of cake. Now, the 2 things I told you to remember. The brown recliner is on my porch, not in a bedroom, not facing a bed. For 8 years that chair sat in a corner, angled toward a mattress, because the whole purpose of the chair was to be near somebody who might need something at any moment. That is what the chair was for. That is what I was for. It faces the street now. I sit in it in the morning with coffee before work, and I watch a woman 2 doors down walk her dog past my mailbox, and nobody in that chair is waiting to be needed. And the timer, I gave it to Junie when she went back to school. Wind up, white plastic, older than I am. I wrote one line on an index card and taped it to the bottom. The card says, "The hours happen whether or not anyone writes them down. Make sure somebody writes them down, because that is the whole thing. That is what 8 years cost me, and what 5 years gave back." My sister was right about one thing, and she was right about it for 6 years. And she was right about it all the way to the bottom line of a payment register with 72 entries on it. You do not send a bill to family. You do not. That is exactly what she was counting on. That sentence was not a value. It was a business model, and it only works on the person who believes it. I never sent one. I did not have to. It turned out that somebody in my family had been keeping a perfect ledger of my hours the entire time, in ink, mailed in every month, right down to the 2-hour blocks in the middle of the night. All I ever had to do was ask to read it. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I would like you to actually answer it in the comments, because I read them. If somebody in your family suddenly had to prove what you have done for them with a document from a third party, not a story they tell at a funeral, could they? And if the honest answer is no, then the second question is the one that took me 8 years and a laundry basket in the back of a truck to ask. Who is keeping the record of you? Because somebody is. Somebody is always keeping the record. The only thing you have to decide is whether you are ever going to be the one who reads it.